Porque diga lo que diga, yo soy libre de pensar, porque siento que es la hora de ganar la libertad. ¿Hasta cuando ya de abusos es el tiempo de cambiar? Porque basta de miseria, voy a decir que no.
Porque nace el arco iris después de la tempestad. Porque quiero que florezcan mil maneras de pensar. Porque sin la dictadura la alegría va a llegar. Porque pienso en el futuro, voy a decir que no.
Vamos a decir que no.
Oh, con la fuerza de mi voz.
Vamos a decir que no. Oh,
yo lo canto sin temor.
Vamos a decir que no. Oh,
todos juntos a triunfar.
Vamos a decir que no.
Por la vida y por la paz.
Terminemos con la muerte, es la oportunidad
de vencer a la violencia.
Okay, so welcome to the return of Marco Polo once again. This spectacular sight, most spectacular sight behind us, is the Gambier Islands, the lagoon of the Gambier Islands. We have the island with the two peaks, that's Mangareva, just behind us here, some 7 miles, nautical miles behind us. We have been here before with the Marco Polo, and one of our earlier programs we have told you about the ancient history of these islands, about the people, the first settlers who came here, the Polynesians who arrived from nobody knows from where, but from some distant islands. These people, we have been looking at their archaeological sites here, asking ourselves questions like why they came, from where they came, etc. But it didn't stay as a purely Polynesian island, this lagoon. Right now we are on the top of the island of Karamaka, looking here, and even here we have found remnants of the old people. But actually things really started to change when the first European ships came or arrived here at the Gambier Islands. Well, those who came were first traders, whalers, who came to rest some time here. Then also missionaries had an important role to play in the islands. The first European ship to actually sight these islands was a ship sent out by the London Missionary Society. Its name was the Duff. It was sent out and arrived here in 1797. And let us look in the logbook of Captain Wilson and see what he wrote about these islands when he saw them for the first time. When within 3 leagues we saw a reef ahead and the sea breaking very high upon it. This obliged us to alter our course to north-northwest, which we expected would lead us clear of every danger which lay on the east side of the island. But in this we were mistaken, for after running thus about an hour we had a better view, and it appeared that Duff's Mountains were part of an island of about 3 leagues in length, with several of considerable height and extent to the south and southeast of it. The main island and those scattered about it are, as before noticed, all high, and the reef keeping the sea quite still about them. They present a view romantic, wild and barren. The valleys, however, appeared covered with trees, but of what kind we could not perceive, though some said they could distinguish coconut trees, and it is certainly likely they should have the fruits and roots common to the other islands, and must have abundance of fish. The group was named Gambier Islands in compliment to the worthy admiral of that name who, in his department, countenanced our equipment. However, it was not the DOF, or its short visit which should mean anything significant for these islands. It was to be missionaries and tradesmen who should be the first to settle here. The South Pacific was well suited for missionary work, and the English missionaries had long been in Tahiti and other Pacific islands. Some 200 years ago, shortly after the French Revolution, many tradesmen in Europe saw new possibilities in the South Pacific. Though the bulk of islands had been discovered, each year still brought new islands on the chart. Together with Dominique, we are on our way across the lagoon. We will visit some of the places which can tell us about the meeting between the Europeans and the islanders.
Alors, depuis les années 1800, il y a eu plusieurs visites de voiliers, pas seulement français, de toute nationalité. Et les Européens se sont réellement installés, surtout depuis l'arrivée des missionnaires en 1834. À partir de 1834, il y a eu constamment des Européens à Mangareva jusqu'à aujourd'hui.
The islanders, that is the Polynesians, did not know very much about money. In fact, they had no money until the Europeans told them what it was. The tradesmen found a very fine type of wood, the sandalwood, on many of these islands. They started emptying the islands for the wood. They found the copra derived from the coconuts, at that time a highly valued item which was used for oil of all kinds. And whalers began sailing the East and South Pacific, getting a real good catch of whales. And this is in fact where the history of the church at Mangareva begins. One of the whalers, on its way back to Europe, called in at Valparaiso in Chile. There the rumors spread. There is a group of islands, Mangareva is the name, where cannibals still live. They don't touch us, the whalers, but they like to eat each other. That rumor spread in Chile. But there was more to it. The whalers had seen the biggest and most precious pearls found in the lagoon of Mangareva. And to prove this, the captain of the whaling ship produced a fine pearl which he said he had acquired for a bag of flour. Now, this was news. The Catholic Church selected some missionaries to go there, partly to convert the cannibals into good Christians, and partly to get firm grip of the pearl production in the lagoon of this mostly unknown group of islands.
Alors c'était au début du mois d'août 1834 qu'un navire mouille devant Tokani. Tokani, c'est la deuxième baie de Akamaro, de l'île de Akamaro. Et donc il est descendu de ce navire deux pères, le père Carré et le père Laval. Alors, on a entendu parler beaucoup du père Laval, mais le père Carré est mort trop jeune. Mais c'était le père Carré qui était le chef de la mission catholique, parce que Rome avait entendu qu'il y avait des nouveaux territoires qui étaient occupés et qu'il y avait donc une population qu'il fallait absolument éclairer dans le domaine de la religion, quoi, dans l'esprit.
The missionaries went ashore at this island, and having christened most of the population, they began construction of the first church here in the Gambier Islands. This was built of blocks of coral and volcanic rock from the mountain.
Alors, ils débarquent à Tokani et tout de suite, ils ont eu un très bon accueil parce que c'est naturel chez le Polynésien de bien accueillir. Et donc, ils ont tout de suite instruit la population d'Akamaro. d'après ce que le père Laval écrit, il disait que les gens voulaient savoir toujours plus. Les pères n'avaient même pas le temps de manger. Ils voulaient toujours, les gens de Akamaru voulaient toujours savoir plus. Donc ils ont dressé une petite église d'abord, en bois et en feuilles de pandanus, très très petite, mais c'était nécessaire au départ. Ensuite, ça a été l'île d'Akena qui a été donc investie, et il y a eu donc la même chose. Alors, un petit peu plus tard, quelques jours plus tard, c'était la grande île, l'île de Mangareva. Et ils ont eu pas un très bon accueil à l'île de Arikitea. Enfin, pas trop mauvais non plus. Ils ont commencé à faire le tour, et en visitant toute la population, en visitant l'île, et ça pouvait aller. Mais c'est arrivé à Ateoa que là, ils ont eu des problèmes. Ils ont cru comprendre que les gens de Ateoa préparaient un four pour les faire cuire. Et devant cet état de choses, eh bien, ils se sont enfuis par la montagne, craignant d'être mangés. Ensuite, ils sont repartis sur l'île de Akena ou d'Akamaru.
After all, Père Laval succeeded in his works by christening most of the people on all the islands. The main island in the group, the largest and the one with most inhabitants, was Mangareva. As you heard, Laval had some difficulties here, which he eventually was able to overcome. Let us visit one of the places where we can see some of the buildings left after Laval and his missionaries.
Mais qu'est-ce que la construction derrière nous?
Eh bien, il faut d'abord savoir que nous sommes dans le couvent.
Ouais.
Et la construction qui est derrière nous, c'est une construction, c'est une maison qui avait deux fonctions. Il y a une pièce qui sert de réfectoire,
ouais,
cuisine, et puis aussi salle à manger.
Ouais.
Et une autre qui est la salle de prière, une chapelle, c'est une chapelle.
Ouais. Et qu'est-ce que ça?
Alors ça, c'est le grand dortoir.
Ouais.
C'est donc le bâtiment où toutes les jeunes filles,
ouais,
il y avait ici, toutes les filles et les femmes dormaient. Il y avait un étage.
Ah oui.
Il y avait plusieurs personnes, beaucoup de...
Ça a été pour combien à peu près?
Alors, exactement, je ne sais pas, mais je sais que ça a dépassé plus de 50 jeunes filles. Il y avait plusieurs dizaines de jeunes filles. Et pendant plusieurs années, le couvent avait une grande réputation dans tout le Pacifique. Ouais. Le couvent de Rouro à Mangareva, au Gambier, était très très connu. Alors ici, les filles s'occupaient à faire différents travaux. Ouais. Ils faisaient les vêtements, ouais, ils filaient le coton, ouais, ils faisaient du jardin. Ici, il y avait une très très belle allée où à chaque côté de l'allée, il y avait des orangers. Il y avait énormément d'orangers. À cette époque-là, l'oranger poussait très bien. Et quand les visiteurs de Mangareva, comme bien du Petit Touar, où tous les grands navigateurs, les capitaines de bateaux, quand ils passaient ici, eh bien, ils étaient à chaque fois très très surpris par la grandeur de ce couvent, par tout ce que faisaient les sœurs. Et c'était formidable.
Together with Dominic, we take a trip to another side of the island. Mangareva is almost 6 miles long, and the two mountains are more than 500 meters high. Scientists believe that this island is the rest of a huge volcanic crater. The island is, so to say, the rim of that crater. The soil is fertile. There is a lot of water, and the bush grows very fast. Navigators have seen them from far away already since the first Polynesian settlers came here. They rise like two rocks from the water in a distance of more than 40 miles. Nearer, we can see the islands and the peaks change their shape all the time due to the ship's movement. It is actually a most spectacular sight. On the road, we stop to have a look at once another building from the time of Laval.
Ça, c'est une maison d'habitation, probablement, parce que lorsque les missionnaires sont venus, ils ont construit les églises et les maisons pour le roi, et ensuite le presbytère, la maison pour le père et tout. Tous les chefs de district, ici c'est à Tituiti, tous les chefs de district, ils sont fiers parce qu'ils sont chefs, c'est normal. Ils veulent avoir aussi leur maison en pierre. Quand tout le monde était baptisé ici, les gens ont fini par comprendre au bout de 4-5 ans que c'était leur nouvelle religion et que quand le roi ensuite était baptisé, eh bien, ils ne pensaient plus, ils pensaient que les dieux avant ou l'ancienne religion, c'est vrai, c'était pas bien. Que la nouvelle religion avec les frères, c'est bien. Parce qu'ils ont les techniques. Ils pensent que les pères sont inspirés vraiment du nouveau Dieu. Parce qu'ils connaissent beaucoup de choses. Ils peuvent faire des églises, des cathédrales, ils peuvent faire des routes. Ils savent beaucoup de choses. Et ils pensent qu'il faut absolument suivre ces gens-là, suivre leur idée. Et les missionnaires avaient le roi et tous les chefs de district avaient confiance en ces missionnaires. Et les missionnaires parlaient avec les chefs de district. Ensuite, il y avait une sorte de concurrence parce que les gens de Atituiti voulaient avoir une belle route, avoir de belles maisons, avoir tout très beau. Mais les gens de Likitia aussi, les gens de Taku, tous les gens de tous les districts, il y avait une certaine concurrence comme un sport pour dire que Atituiti, c'est très joli la route. Et je crois qu'il n'y avait pas d'autre chose à faire en ce temps-là. Il fallait seulement construire.
But Laval had one problem which had to be dealt with. The islands had their own religion. Monuments, the so-called marais to the god Tu, were built in old times all over the place. Dominic explains what happened.
Il dit aux habitants qu'il faut renverser les idoles. Il faut arrêter. C'est un Dieu qui n'est pas vrai. C'est un faux Dieu. Il faut écouter notre parole. Nous avons un Dieu plus puissant. Et ils étaient beaucoup aidés parce que les missionnaires pouvaient guérir aussi certaines petites maladies, des petites grippes, des petites maladies. Ils avaient quelques petits médicaments, ils savaient ce qu'il fallait faire et ils guérissaient beaucoup de gens. Les gens voyaient que les pères catholiques étaient puissants, donc ils avaient un Dieu très puissant aussi. Et ils voyaient aussi les pères tous les jours qui priaient. Bref, ils ont réussi à convaincre tout le monde. Ils n'ont pas eu beaucoup de mal à convaincre les gens de tout enlever et ces matériaux vont servir à construire un autre monument beaucoup plus grand, beaucoup plus gigantesque que leur marais. Et c'est ce qu'ils ont fait sans trop de difficultés. Ils ont renversé toutes les idoles, ils ont brûlé toutes les idoles. Par exemple, ce marais qui a été détruit, nous pouvons apercevoir ici qu'il y a eu des morceaux de roche qui ont servi pour la construction d'une maison. Et ici, nous voyons qu'il a été commencé à scier ce morceau, c'est du corail, hein? Et nous voyons qu'il a commencé à scier ce morceau, probablement pour servir aussi pour la maison. Je crois qu'à cette époque-là, c'était fini. Il fallait vraiment tout oublier de l'ancienne religion.
The largest project, however, was the cathedral. Laval's plan was to build a cathedral which should forever be a glorious reminder of the time when he christened the population of the Gambier Islands. It was a very ambitious project. Only a few years ago, this was still the largest church in Polynesia. Not even Tahiti had in 150 years a church as big as this one. The church was built exactly on the site of one of the most important holy ancient monuments. It is built in coral blocks. You must imagine that every single block has been cut out in one of the remote islands in the southeastern side of the lagoon. The blocks, very heavy and difficult to handle, were then transported across the lagoon on double canoes, specially designed for this purpose. Block after block, stone after stone, were taken across the 10-mile lagoon, thousands of voyages, thousands of hours and days. The church, still used today, is built after normal European standards and principles and can accommodate as much as 1,200 people. When Laval began his work, the population was around 2,500 in the entire lagoon, that is, on all the islands. 1,500 lived at Mangareva, but in a period of only 20 years, the population was decimated to only 1,300 in the lagoon and around 600 at Mangareva. What happened? The fact is that it was the local people who did all the construction work. Churches, monasteries, towers, houses, prisons, roads, walls, arcs, buildings and buildings, hundreds of buildings. This was a complete change of lifestyle. Traditionally, the people had been living from the nature, fishing and picking fruit and growing vegetables, but never used to hard work. It is very probable that, like the American Indians, the local people simply could not cope with this new system of labor. The result was disease and death, both physically and mentally. The diseases meant that many of the proud buildings were never to be used as intended. Instead, quickly they were abandoned, and it has been so ever since. We went over the lagoon to the island of Akina. Here, in the forest, we find a large complex of buildings. We must imagine this place as a park. Here we had a monastery for young men from the islands, 2-story buildings, large kitchens, prayer rooms, schoolrooms, dormitories. Since last century, everything has been abandoned, and the bush is now the ruler here. Big trees grow up in the roofless buildings. Wooden frames over the windows and doors have rotten away long, long ago, and the place is only infrequently visited by people from Mangareva. The water is shallow around this island, and careful navigation is necessary. Dominico is on the lookout for coral patches as we go near the other side of the island. Here, in what appears to be dense bush, we find a church, the only well-maintained building on the island. The people from Mangareva have donated money for a roof and painting. This church may have looked a little different, but we must imagine the Catholic priest explaining the former cannibals of Akina about Jesus and Maria in this church room. We must imagine that the beach was visible through the windows, and that on these coral blocks the people have been walking up and down. We must imagine that in this church the funerals have been held, funerals for the people that built the church and all the other buildings. And as a finale, we must imagine the last service held here, the service which would explain to the people that there were too few inhabitants at the island to maintain the religious community. The people moved to Mangareva. The same thing happened at the island of Taravai. Here, on the second largest island in the group, another splendid church was built. But also here we only now see the empty room. The church is not in use anymore. There are no inhabitants at Taravai. After King Maputeoa's death, Laval was the sole ruler of Gambier Islands. He imposed a regime where his word was law, God's law, which no one could decline to follow. The prison was built to take care of those who did not abide. The Catholic Church, with Laval, monopolized the trade with mother of pearl and set up a system of fixed prices. They sold shiploads of mother of pearl to Tahiti, and they restricted all other tradesmen from making business at the Gambier Islands. Exactly this was to be the beginning of the end for Laval and his regime. His iron rule was also imposed on the ships passing by. He prevented the crews, some of them having arrived after several months at sea, from coming ashore. The ships could not have contact with the local people. They were not allowed to buy pearls or mother of pearl from the local people. Angry captains reported all this to the authorities in Tahiti and even in Paris.